The snow had been falling for 3 days when I saw the smoke. It rose from a thread of chimney at the far edge of a clearing I had not put on any map of my own kingdom. A cabin, low and narrow, almost folded into the trees, with one yellow window burning against the white. I held up my hand and the 3 wolves behind me stopped at once. We did not breathe. We did not move. For 91 days I had ridden these woods, tracked every scent the wind would give me, broken 3 horses and 4 boots, and slept perhaps an hour in any night. For 91 days I had been a king whose heir was lost, and a man who could not say his nephew's name without his throat closing on it. Now I stood in the dark between 2 pines and looked through a stranger's window, and I saw a small black wolf curled by a hearth, his head against a woman's knee, alive. I did not weep. A king does not weep in the snow with his sworn behind him. But something in my chest that had been held closed for 3 months opened all at once, like a door blown back in a storm, and for a moment I could not put words in any order I had ever known. The woman's hand was on his ear. She was reading from a book by the firelight, her lips moving softly, and the pup, Rowan, my brother's only son, 8 years old, the last drop of my brother's blood, leaned into her as if she were the warm wall of the world. I had seen that lean 1,000 times in his short life. I had seen it when his father carried him. I had seen it when he was given to me to hold the night his mother died. He gave that lean to no one easily. He had given it to her. Bryn moved up beside me. He did not speak. He only looked and then bowed his great dark head once, the way a wolf bows when something true has been found. Iran and Vasha came up at my other side. None of them said a word. They had been with me when the riders came back from the long road empty-handed. They had been with me when I knelt in the snow at the place we had lost him and dug with my hands until the dawn came. They knew what they were looking at. I should have gone to her door at once. I should have hammered it from its hinges and brought my nephew home, but I did not. I stood and watched a stranger read to my heir as if he were her own, and a thing I had not felt in many years and could not have named for any counsel moved through me. A still, quiet recognition behind the ribs, the way a man may walk into a room he has never been in and know which window his bed should face. I did not know her name. I did not know her face yet, only its line in the lamplight, the soft fall of her hair across her shoulder, the way her fingers stroked through the pup's fur as if she were thanking him for being warm. I knew, even then, that I had been brought to this door by something larger than my tracking. I let the snow fall a long minute more, then I stepped out from the pines. "Stay," I said to my wolves, and the 3 of them sat down at once in the snow like obedient hounds, every one of them my equal in the field and my brother in arms, and watched me walk to the door of the cabin alone. I left my sword at my back. I left my crown at the citadel. I had ridden for 91 days as a man, not a king, and I had no wish to come to this woman's door in any other shape. I knocked. I heard the book close. I heard the soft scuff of a chair being moved with care so as not to disturb the pup. Then her voice, low through the wood. "Who is there?" "A traveler," I said. "It was not a lie. I saw your smoke." There was a pause. A bolt was drawn. The door opened a hand's breadth and her face was in the gap, lit from below by her hearth. I have stood in many doorways in my life. I have ridden into many halls. I have been crowned and feasted and bowed to, and I had thought, by my 40th year, that there was no face the world could put in front of me that I had not seen the likeness of before. I was wrong. She was perhaps 30. Her hair was the dark brown of river stones. Her cheek had a smear of ash on it where she had touched her face by the fire. Her eyes were gray and steady and looked into mine without flinching, though I am a tall man and was made larger by my fur, and she was alone in the woods with a wounded pup behind her. There was no fear on her face. There was only the kind of carefulness a woman wears who has been taught not to expect kindness from a knock at her door. The scent that came past her into the snow struck me like a remembered name I had never been told. Pine sap, bone broth, lavender on the linen of her cuff, and under all of it, the warm, clean smell of a woman whose heart I would have known in any wind. A stillness moved through me, low and certain, as if a winter river had quieted at its bed. I have heard old men of my pack speak of the bond, and I had never until that moment understood what they meant. They had been trying, in their plain words, to tell me that one day a stranger's door would open, and a small part of the world would set itself right, and I would not be the same man on the other side of it. "You will be cold out there," she said, practical, already moving back to let me in. "Come and warm yourself." I did not move. "There is a pup at your fire." Her chin rose the smallest fraction. "There is." "He is mine," I said. She did not gasp. She did not step back. She looked at me steadily and then past me, and her gray eyes found the 3 black wolves sitting in the snow at the edge of her clearing, and her mouth made the shape of understanding without making any sound. She looked at me again. "Then you have come a long way for him," she said. "Come in." I stepped through her door, and I have not stepped back through it in any way that mattered since. The cabin was one room, a bed in the corner under a folded gray quilt, a table with 2 chairs, only one of them with its cushion worn, a shelf of books, fewer than 10, all of them mended at the spine with thread. A hearth swept clean of ash before the fire was laid, a pot on a hook above the flames, the broth in it so thin I could see the bone moving when the heat made it tremble. A single window, 3 small panes, the one in the corner cracked and stuffed with rag. It was a poor place. It was the cleanest poor place I had ever stood in. Every inch of it had been cared for by hands that had had nothing to spare and had spared something anyway. Rowan lifted his head when I came in. He saw me. His ears went up. His tail thumped once against the hearthstones, and then he tried to rise and could not, and made a low pained sound, and her hand was on him at once, soothing. "Easy," she said to him. Then to me without turning her head, "His back leg is not yet right. Sit before you frighten him further." I sat. A king does not often sit at the bidding of a woman in a one-room cabin, but I sat. I went down on my knees beside the hearth and held out my hand to my nephew, and Rowan dragged himself across the stones and laid his head across the back of my wrist as if to keep me there, and I bent forward and pressed my forehead to his fur, and for the first time in 3 months I let my eyes close. I do not know how long I knelt. I felt her move quietly around me. I heard the soft clink of a cup. I heard her speaking to the pup in a low, warm tone. "You knew him, didn't you? All this time you knew." And when I finally lifted my head, she was setting a steaming cup of something dark on the hearthstone beside my hand and stepping back, courteous as any chamberlain in my court, to give me my moment. "Thank you," I said. My voice was rough. "I am Myra," she said. "I will not ask your name if you do not want to give it." I looked up at her then properly for the first time. The firelight made gold of the loose hair at her temple. The hand she had taken back from setting the cup was thin, with the cracks on the knuckles of a woman who washed her own linens in cold water through a long winter. Her wrist, where her sleeve had fallen back, was bare of any mark. Bare. The bond had struck me at her door, and her wrist was still bare. Then it was striking only in me, and she did not yet know. I did not tell her my name, not because I would not give it, but because I wanted her to know me a little while as the man at her door, before she knew me as a king. "I am Kale," I said. It was the name my brother had called me, the name no one in my hall had said in a year. "Kale," she said, as if she were trying its weight, "you have ridden far." 91 days. She nodded as if that explained much. "He came to my door the second night of the storms," she said. "I thought he was a wolf cub. He was no bigger than a loaf of bread, and his back leg was bleeding. I brought him in. I did not know what he was." "He is a shifter," I said. "A child of my pack. His name is Rowan." She drew in a small breath. Her hand went to her mouth for one quick beat and then dropped. She looked down at the pup, who was watching her now with his ears up, and her face did a great quiet thing, a movement of grief and tenderness and a kind of dawning fear, all of it at once. "Oh," she said, "only that. Oh." You did not know. I gave him broth, she whispered. Twice a day. I gave him my own bread. I told him stories. I read to him because his eyes followed the page. She looked up at me, stricken, and the gray of her eyes was bright. If I had known he was a child I would have done so many other things. I would have looked for his people. I would have walked to the road and stopped any rider that came past. I did not see any rider in all this winter. I am so far from the road. I am so sorry. Myra, I said her name as if I were laying a hand on her. Myra, look at me. She looked. You fed an 8-year-old boy through the cruelest winter I can remember, I said. You laid him by your fire. You read to him at night. You gave him your bread when there is not enough on your shelf for one woman alone. I let her see my face. I let her see what I felt. I do not know who hurt you in the life behind you that you think you must apologize for keeping my heir alive, but I am here to tell you that whoever they were wrong about you. They were wrong about you to a degree I do not yet have words for. You did not need to know who he was to do what you did. You did it because you would have done it for any small thing that came bleeding to your door. She did not answer. Her chin trembled once, was steadied, did not tremble again. She turned her face away from me and looked at her fire. I watched her hand find the pup's ear and steady itself there, and I understood that she had been holding herself together for a long time and was not going to come apart in front of a stranger no matter what kindness he offered her. I would learn what they had done to her. I would learn that night and many nights after, and I would have to keep my hands very still on my knees while I listened. For now, I sat by her fire and drank what she had given me, a hot dark tea of pine needles and one dried berry, the kind of drink a woman makes when she has nothing else to offer a guest and is too proud to apologize for it. And I let the door of my chest stay open, and I felt the bond settle in like a guest who had come a long way and intended to stay. Outside in the snow, my 3 sworn wolves sat watching the window, and inside it my heir slept across the boots of a woman I had not yet earned, and I knew that whatever I had been before this door, I would be something else when I went back through it. She would not let me leave that night. You have ridden 91 days, she said, and your pup will not be moved before his leg knits. There is a barn at the back of the cabin. It is not much, there is hay. I will go and lay it for your wolves. You will stay by your boy. I will lay it, I said. You will stay by your boy. I stayed by my boy. She went out with an armful of old wool blankets and her thin shawl drawn up, and I watched through the cracked window as she walked across the snow to the small lean-to at the back of her cabin, my 3 great sworn rising to meet her as if she were their queen, and not a frightened woman alone in the woods. Bryn lowered his enormous black head to her hand, and she touched him without fear, and I saw Vasha, who had bitten 3 of my own counselors who reached for him too quickly, lie down at her feet to keep her boots out of the deep snow while she spread the wool. When she came back in, her cheeks were red with cold and her shawl was crusted with white, and she shed the shawl by the door and shook it out neatly and hung it on a peg, and went straight to her hearth and put more wood on the fire because her guest was cold. She did not look at me as she did it. I have lived among proud people all my life. My court is full of them. I have a council of 9, and not one of them would lift a log into a fire for a man warmer than themselves. I watched her bend and lift, and I felt the slow, certain anger of a man who is realizing, piece by piece, that the woman in front of him has been alone for a very long time, and that no one in the place she came from ever lifted a single log for her. Myra. Yes. Sit, I said, please. She sat on the edge of the chair, her hands in her lap, like a child summoned to head of house. The firelight found her face from the side, and I saw, properly now, the line of her cheek and the soft, straight bridge of her nose, and the way her mouth set itself, brave and ready. She would have made a better Luna already than half the women my council had put before me. Tell me, I said, whose woods is your cabin in? The king's woods, she said. Yes, I said, tell me how you came here. She drew in a small, slow breath and let it out, and then she told me. She had been raised in a pack 2 valleys to the south. The Grafen, she said. I knew the name. A middle pack, neither great nor poor, with a strong farm road and a weekly led council. Her father had been a logger. Her mother had died when she was 12. At 18 she had been chosen for the bond by a young wolf called Doran, the son of the pack's captain of arms. He was handsome enough and well enough thought of, she said, and she had been gentle and had not expected to be loved more than that. They were promised at the spring rite, but the bond did not ignite. She had waited a year. He had waited a year. At the next choosing he was given another woman, the captain's choice. And he stood up in front of the pack and named Myra a Baron Omega, and said the moon had given him a clearer sign, and asked the council to release him. The council released him. That is not the worst of it, she said quietly, looking at her hands. Tell me. The captain's family did not want me near them after. They asked the council to send me away. The council said I could go anywhere within the king's lands. My father is a good man, but he is afraid of the captain. He took me to the edge of the Grafen wood and gave me his old hunting cabin and 4 months of bread and salt, and he asked me on his honor not to come back. He said he would be punished if I came back. I told him I would not come back. She did not lift her head. That was 4 winters ago, she said. I did not move. I did not trust myself to move. Outside, the wind shifted, and one of my wolves howled once low, and the sound was the sound of my own throat refusing to make. 4 winters, alone, in a cabin not big enough to turn around in. A woman barely 30, healthy and gentle and braver than the captain of any pack in my kingdom, fed on her own broth and her own bread, mending her own books with thread because she could not get to a town to buy new ones, and not a single one of those wretched people had ridden out in 4 years to see whether she was still alive. I made my hands very still on my knees. How did you live? I asked. The question was nothing. I could see how she had lived, but I wanted to give her something to answer that was not the wound. I have an herb garden in summer, she said. I dry it. I trade what I do not need to a charcoal burner who passes once a month in the warm season. He brings me a sack of flour and a little salt and 1 book if there is one to spare. There was no book this winter. And the pup. She lifted her head. Her face changed when she looked at the pup. The brave, careful set went out of it. Something soft came into it instead. Something so plain and so true that I had to look away for a moment to keep my own face from showing what was in mine. Came on the 2nd night of the snows, she said. I had a half a loaf left. I gave him a quarter of it. He ate it and looked at me as if he had not eaten in a week. So the next morning I gave him another quarter. And then I made a broth from the bones I had been saving for my own stew. He drank it from a bowl I set down. He has been drinking from a bowl every day. I did not think he was a child. I thought he was a wolf cub who liked to be near me. He sleeps on my feet. He follows me to the woodpile. I have not been alone since he came. She put her face down then. Her shoulders did 1 small shake and were still. I am sorry, she whispered. I have not spoken to anyone in a great while. I do not know why I am telling you all of this. Because I asked, I said, and because it is yours to tell, and because you have carried it alone, and a thing carried alone is heavy. She did not answer. Rowan whimpered softly in his sleep. Her hand was on him at once before I could move. She steadied him with the smallest stroke between his ears, and he settled, and her hand stayed there, and her face did not lift to mine again for a long while. I sat with her in the firelight and the wind in the pines, and I made, silently, the only decisions a man can make at such a moment. I would not leave her in this cabin. I would not take her from it before she chose to come. I would not let any of those people, in any of their valleys, lay 1 finger on her again. And I would not name myself king to her until I had earned her trust as the man at her door. I do not know when I slept that night, only that I woke to a hand on my arm and a voice in my ear saying my name, very low. Kale. I came up at once. The fire was banked. The light in the cabin had changed, the gray of an early hour. Myra's face was close to mine and her gray eyes were wide. "Look," she breathed. I looked. By the hearth where Rowan had been a black pup all the long night, my nephew lay in the shape of a boy. 8 years old, narrow-shouldered, his hair the soot-black of his father's, his small chest rising and falling under the wool blanket Myra had laid across him. His bandaged leg, the one I had not seen out of fur for 3 months, was straight and clean and wrapped in linen torn from her own underskirt. I went down on my knees beside him. I am not a man who weeps. I do not know what fell from my eyes onto the back of my nephew's hand. I do not know what sound I made. I only know that I gathered him to me and held him, and he did not wake, only sighed and turned his cheek into the cloth of my coat and slept on, the way he had slept against his father in another lifetime. Myra stood back. She had drawn her shawl around her shoulders. She was holding her hands very tightly together in front of her, and her face had gone white. He is a boy," she said. "He is a child." "He is my brother's son," I said. "His name is Rowan. He is 8 years old. His father is dead. His mother is dead. He has been the heir of my house since he could walk." She did not move. "3 months ago," I said, "the Iron Crown's road was set upon by men from a place I will deal with in my own time. My nephew was riding with a small guard. He shifted in the attack. They shift young in our line in moments of fear and ran into the trees with a wound. The guard who survived found a great deal of blood and no body. We thought him dead. I have ridden every wood in this kingdom looking for him, and I came at last to your door." She closed her eyes. "I fed the heir of the Iron Crown thin broth," she whispered. "You fed a frightened child what you had," I said. "It was the right food, Myra. He is alive." "I read to him," she said, "from a book that had 3 of its pages missing. Then we will buy him the rest of the book one day, and you will read him the missing pages." She opened her eyes. I think she had not, until that moment, fully understood who had come to her door. Now she did. The Iron Crown, her face said. The black wolves. The king's woods that she had been living in for 4 years. I watched her work it out, and I watched her shoulders set themselves, neither shrinking nor rising. She had been told, 4 winters ago, that she was a barren omega worth nothing. She did not believe the man at her hearth was a king. She was looking at me as if I were one anyway, and as if she had decided to receive me as one without making a show of being either humble or afraid. It was the courtliest thing I have ever been shown by anyone in my life. "I should bow," she said, a small, dry attempt at a smile. "You should not," I said. "You are the king. I am also the man who slept by your hearth last night because you would not let me lie in the barn. Sit, Myra. Eat with me. There is broth left in the pot, and there is a half-loaf of bread in my saddlebag that I have been carrying for 2 days because I have not been hungry. You will share it with me. Then we will speak about what is to be done." She sat, she ate, she did not cry, she did not bow. She did, however, push the larger half of the bread toward me, and I pushed it back, and she pushed it again, and I finally took her wrist, gently, with the back of 2 fingers, to stop her hand from moving the bread. It was the first time I had touched her. On the inside of her wrist, where my fingers brushed her skin, a mark bloomed. It came up the way frost comes up on a window pane, slowly at first, a thin pale line, then a curl of darker silver, then a small clean shape like a sickle moon resting on the curve of her bone. She froze. I froze. We watched her wrist together. The mark settled and rested and shone faintly in the early light. I turned my own wrist over. My mate mark, the mark I had been told as a boy I might one day carry and had stopped expecting by my 30th year, rested there in the same shape, the silver sickle moon, the small clean curve. Myra's hand had gone very still under mine. "What is this?" she said quietly, not afraid, only asking. "It is what my people call the bond mark," I said. It comes when a man and a woman who were meant to find each other have done so. It came in your wrist also. It did. She looked at her wrist, and then at mine, and then at my face. The gray of her eyes was very deep. I have been told, she said carefully, by men who knew more than I did that I was unbondable. Then they were wrong about that as well. She looked at her wrist again. Her fingers, half curled in mine, tightened a small fraction and then loosened again, as if she had remembered to be careful with what was given to her. What does it ask of me, she said, this mark? Nothing it does not also ask of me, I said, and nothing you do not give. She looked at me a long moment. Then she nodded once, gravely, as if I had given her a piece of news she would need to think on for a long while, and she withdrew her wrist from under my fingers and set her hand back in her lap, and finished her bread. I let her go. I did not press her. The bond does not need to be pressed. A king who would press it does not deserve to wear the mark. I would learn in the days that followed that no one before me had ever waited for Myra to be ready. Her former mate had wanted her to be already what he needed her to be. Her father had needed her gone. Her pack had wanted her quiet. I would give her a thing she had not been given before. I would wait. We stayed at her cabin for 9 days. I will not tell you everything that happened in those 9 days. Some of it is hers and not mine to give, but I will tell you the shape of it. Rowan would not let me out of his sight, and he would not let Myra out of it either. He padded between us as a pup in the morning and a boy by the fire at night, and he ate steadily and put on weight, and the bandage on his leg came off on the 6th day, and he walked without a limp by the 8th. He called her Myra, and he called me uncle, and he made no distinction between the two of us when he reached for a hand. We were his pack, and that was the end of it. I sent Bryn back to the citadel on the first morning with a letter. The letter said, I have found him, he lives. We are at a cabin 1 day's ride from the southern road. Send Hessa with the small carriage, the warm blankets, and the green velvet cloak from the Luna's room. Send nothing else. Send no men. Iran and Vasha stay with me. Tell the council nothing yet. I did not write in that first letter. I have found her also. But Bryn knew. Wolves know. He bowed his head to Myra when he left her clearing, and he did not bow his head when he passed me. It was the kind of message my sworn liked to send. Iran and Vasha stayed with us. They slept in her barn and ate the broth she made, and let her touch their muzzles, and pulled fresh wood from the snow with their teeth, and brought it up to her door. Vasha, who had not let any woman near him since his mate was killed in the same ambush that took Rowan, let Myra comb burrs from his coat on the 4th night, and laid his head in her lap for an hour, and slept. I helped her with what she would let me help with. I split her wood. I mended her cracked window with proper putty I had Hessa send out with the carriage. I hung a new bolt on her door that did not stick. I learned the names of every herb on her shelf because she told me them as she worked. I learned how she made bread from a flour I would have thought was too coarse for a king's dogs, and I learned that her bread was better than my baker's, and I told her so, and she smiled. The first time I saw her smile properly, I had to look away from her like a boy. She looked away from me, too. Neither of us said anything about it. I told her on the 3rd night that I was the Alpha King of the Iron Crown, and that my hall lay 2 days' ride to the north, and that my house had stood for 9 generations, and that I was the last grown son of it. She listened, she nodded. She said I had begun to think it was something of that sort. I told her on the 5th night that the bond between us was true, and that I would honor it for as long as she would let me, and that if she chose to ride away from this cabin in any direction other than mine, I would let her go and never trouble her, and never send another man after her, and the wood she stood in would be hers forever, and no one would touch it. She listened, she nodded. She said, I will think on it. I told her on the 7th night, sitting on the floor with her by the fire while Rowan slept across both our laps, that I had not known what loneliness was until I had ridden 91 days without finding the child in my keeping, and that I had not known what the end of loneliness looked like until I stepped through her door, and that whatever she chose, I would not be the same man. She did not answer me that time. She put her hand slowly on the back of mine, where it rested on Rowan's small ribcage, and she left it there. We did not speak again that night. I would have stayed in that cabin a year, 2 years, whatever she needed. I think she knew that. On the 6th morning, Rowan asked, in a small voice from his blanket, for her to read again from the book with the missing pages. It was a book of children's tales I had not seen in 20 years. A blue cloth binding, the gold leaf rubbed off the spine, the pages soft with use. She had read it to him every night since he came to her door. She read it now while she ladled broth and while I cleaned his bandage and while Iran lay across the hearth like a great black rug, and when she came to a page that was missing she did not pause. She simply made up what should have been there. A prince climbed a glass mountain. A small fox spoke kindly to a hungry traveler. A girl in a gray cloak walked into a wolf's hall and was not afraid. Rowan, lying on his side with my hand on his ribs, looked at her as if she had hung the lamps. I had thought before that morning that the bond was a thing of bodies, the mark on my wrist, the catch behind the ribs, the way her scent set itself into me. I learned, watching her invent the missing pages of a children's book for a boy she did not yet know was an heir, that the bond is also a thing of the slow hours, of broth ladled, of a page turned, of a woman who has been alone a long time deciding, without making any speech about it, to let 2 strangers and a wolf settle by her fire, and read the missing pages of her old book aloud. I asked her that night, when Rowan had been carried to bed in my arms and laid down across her bed because the floor was too cold for him, what the last page of the book was. "I do not know," she said. "It was missing when my mother gave it to me. I was 8 myself. I made up the ending. I have made up a different ending every time." "What is tonight's?" She thought a moment, looking into the fire. "The girl in the gray cloak walked into the wolf's hall," she said, "and the wolf gave her his crown to hold while he warmed himself by her hearth, and she gave it back to him because it was his, and he did not need a girl to hold his crown for him. He only needed a girl to read at his fire." I did not answer her that night either. I did not trust the words in my mouth. On the 8th day a storm came down out of the north and we did not go out of doors for 2 days. Hessa's carriage was delayed by it. We had time. Myra moved her cot into the corner so that I and Rowan could lie by the fire together. We told the boy every story between us that we could remember from our own childhoods, his and mine and Myra's, where she would tell them. Rowan asked her 100 questions. Where had she been born? What had her mother been like? Had she ever seen the sea? Had she ever shifted into a wolf? She answered him gently. She had been born in a Grafen valley. Her mother had been a quiet woman who sang while she worked. She had never seen the sea and would like to. No, she had never shifted. She did not carry the gift of the form. "You do not need to," Rowan said firmly. "Bryn likes you better than he likes most wolves, and he is a wolf already. You can be the kind of person wolves like. That is rarer." She kissed the top of his head. Over his hair her eyes met mine, and held, and we did not look away from each other for what felt to me a long while. The carriage came on the morning of the 10th day. So did the Grafen. The Grafen came on the 10th morning. There were 6 of them. They came up out of the south wood at first light, 2 on foot and 4 on shaggy short horses, and at their head was a black-bearded wolf I knew at once from the line of his shoulders to be the captain of the Grafen, the father of the man who had thrown her aside. Behind him, with a face I would learn to know better than I wanted to, rode Doran himself. Iran caught their scent first and brought it to me at the door. He pressed his great head under my hand and growled low. I went to the door. I opened it. I stepped out into the snow without a coat because I wanted them to see me as I was, and I closed Myra and Rowan and Vasha inside behind me with a single word. The captain of the Grafen drew his horse up at the edge of the clearing. He looked at me. He did not yet know who I was. He saw a tall, dark-haired man in shirt sleeves with one great black wolf at his knee, standing on a cabin's threshold, and he made the mistake men of his kind always make in the first moment, which is to assume that because he was on a horse and I was on foot, I was the smaller of us. "Step aside," he said. "We are here for the woman." "You are not," I said. His eyes narrowed. He had a heavy jaw and a bull's neck and a sword too short for the breadth of him. "On whose word?" "On mine." "And who are you?" I did not answer him. I walked down the 3 small steps of her porch into the snow. Iran walked with me. The captain's horse, an honest beast that knew a wolf when it smelled one, took 2 steps backwards and tossed its head. The captain set his heels and held it. Behind him, Doran's face, narrow and pale, had gone the color of old paper. He had recognized something. Not me yet, but something. "Speak your name, man," the captain said, "or stand aside." I let my voice settle into the shape it takes on the throne when I have had enough of a thing. "I am Kale, son of Edric of the line of Thornal, Alpha King of the Iron Crown. The wolf at my knee is my sworn Iran of the Black Pack. There are 3 more of us in this clearing. The woman inside this cabin is under my protection. Withdraw." I have heard a number of silences in my life. The silence at the edge of the Grafin captain's mouth was a particular kind. It was the silence of a man who has just understood in the space of 1 heartbeat that he has ridden onto an Alpha King's wood without leave, threatened an Alpha King's mate, and given an order to an Alpha King's face. The captain went off his horse very fast. He went down on 1 knee in the snow. The 4 behind him went down also. Only Doran did not move. He sat his horse and stared at me, and I saw his eyes go past me to the cabin behind, where through the small window his cast-aside mate stood watching with a wolf at her side and her arm around a black-haired boy. "Down," I said to him, quietly. He came down. He did not kneel. He stood in the snow and looked at the ground. I let them stand in the snow a long minute. I let them feel it. "Captain of the Grafin," I said, "tell me. 4 winters ago, this woman was brought to a cabin on the king's land by her father and left here. Did you know?" "Yes, my lord." "Did you ride out, in any of those 4 winters, to see whether she lived?" "No, my lord." "Did any one of your pack?" "No, my lord." "Did her own father?" A small pause. "No, my lord." "And today you have ridden out for the first time in 4 winters. Why?" "A charcoal burner came through our valley last week. He spoke of seeing wolves at her cabin. The captain of the watch thought it was thought that she might be harboring outlaws." "The wolves are mine," I said. "The man at her door this morning is also mine. Try again, Captain. Why have you ridden out?" He did not answer. I knew the answer, so did he. They had come because they had heard there were wolves at the cabin of a woman they had thrown away, and they had thought there might be a reckoning, and they had decided to get there first. They had come to take her back, or to silence her, or to learn what was happening on a piece of land they had told themselves they owned, because no one had reminded them they did not. "Doran," I said. He flinched at his own name. "You are the man who 4 winters ago stood up in front of your pack and named this woman a Baron Omega and asked the council to release you from your bond." "Yes, my lord." "Look at the wrist on my right arm." He looked. "There is a mark on it," I said. "It came up the morning I touched her. There is a matching mark on her wrist. The pack you stood in front of 4 winters ago will hear, in due course, that the woman they were told was unbondable is the bonded mate of the King of the Iron Crown, and that her former mate is the man who stood up and called her unbondable in front of 200 people, and that her former captain is the man who let it stand and never rode out to look at her again." I let him stand in the snow with that for a while. "What will become of me?" he said. His voice had gone small. "You will live," I said. "I will not strike you. I will not strike any of you. The woman in that cabin has not asked me to. If she does, that will be another matter, but she will not. She is gentler than you have ever earned. You will ride home. You will tell your captain to ride to my citadel within the month and answer to me for 4 winters of neglect on a piece of my own woods. You will ride at his side, and you will speak the truth of what you said and did, and you will hear whatever judgment I lay on your house. You will not come back to this clearing. You will not come within sight of this woman again. If you do, I will not be standing on a porch in my shirt sleeves the next time. I will be in iron, and so will my wolves." He nodded. He did not look up. "Captain." "My lord." "Get back on your horse, take your son, go." They went. I stood in the snow and watched them out of the clearing, and Iran stood at my knee, and behind me the cabin door opened and Myra came out with her shawl around her shoulders and stood beside me without speaking. Her shoulder did not touch mine. She left a hand's breadth of air between us, as she always did, and she looked at the place where her former mate had been, and I could not tell you what was on her face, and I did not look long enough to try. She was the one who broke the silence. "You did not strike him," she said. "You did not ask me to." "No. And he was not worth the splitting of your floor with my blood or his." She made a small sound that I think, if she had been a less tired woman, would have been a laugh. "I did not know," she said, "that I had been so quietly in your kingdom all this time." "All of you are in my kingdom," I said. "Some of you we know about, some we have failed. I will not fail you again." She turned her head and looked up at me. "Kale," she said, "I will come with you." I think the snow stopped falling. I cannot honestly remember. The carriage came that afternoon. Hessa, my old steward, climbed down from the box and stood in the snow with her hands folded and her plain gray traveling dress neat as a chapel pew, and looked at Myra, and made the smallest curtsy I have ever seen a woman of 70 give. Then she went into the cabin and did Myra's hair for her without asking, and brought out the green velvet cloak from the carriage and laid it around Myra's shoulders herself, and stepped back and said only, "There. Now you are ready, my dear," and Myra's chin trembled and held. We did not go fast on the road. Rowan rode in the carriage with Hessa, his small hand wound into the fringe of her shawl, falling asleep and waking again, and reaching for the window to see whether his uncle was still there. I rode beside the carriage. Myra rode beside me. She had asked quietly to be on a horse rather than inside, and I had given her a small bay mare from my own stable and ridden the gentle pace beside her. Iran and Vasha trotted in front. Bryn had ridden back to me on the second night and trotted now at her flank. We made an odd procession on the south road of the Iron Crown, a king in his black coat, a woman in a green velvet cloak that had been his mother's, a carriage with a small boy in it, 3 great black wolves, and an old steward who would not stop straightening the boy's collar. We did not pass through any village. I had given the order. I wanted her in my own gates before any pack got hold of her face. The first night on the road we stopped at a small holding I had taken over for our use. Myra asked to walk a while in the snow before she came inside. She walked the line of the fence with Bryn at her knee, and I watched her from the doorway, and I thought about how she had not been on a road in 4 winters. I thought about how the world must look to a woman who had not seen it since she was 26. The line of distant lamps in the holding's village, the smell of someone else's smoke, the sound of a wagon on a far road, small things, ordinary things. She stood at the fence with Bryn and looked at the lamps a long time. When she came back in, her cheeks were red and her eyes were bright in a different way than they had been bright before, and she took off her cloak and shook the snow from it and hung it on a peg and did not say anything to me about what she had seen out there. I did not ask. Some things are a woman's own. On the 3rd day, we passed within sight of a small charcoal burner's camp at the edge of the road. A spare man in a leather apron stood up from his fire and stared at our procession, and Myra reined in her mare suddenly and called out to him by name. "Anders." He stared at her. "Myra," he said. The word was an old word in his mouth, as if he had not spoken it in a long while, He came forward to the road, leaving his fire. He stopped when he saw the wolves. He stopped when he saw me. He looked at the green velvet cloak. He looked at the carriage. His mouth opened and closed. "You were the only one who came," Myra said to him quietly. "For 4 winters. I will not forget it. When the spring comes, send word to the Iron Crown that you would like a better road and a better cart, and you will have them." He sat down in the snow. He did not bow, he sat. I think he was an honest man and his knees would not hold him. I gave him a small nod and pressed my heels gently to my horse, and we went on. Myra did not look back at him. I asked her later why she had not. "Because if I look back," she said, "I will start telling him things and we will be there all day, and the king has somewhere to be." I have thought about that small exchange many times since. The whole long shape of her 4 winters was in it. A charcoal burner who had brought her flour. A queen, riding past, who had not forgotten his name. That night, the 3rd night, the last night before the gates of the Iron Crown, we stopped again at a small inn I had taken over for our use, and Myra stood at the small window of the room I had given her and looked out at the snow, and I came to the open door and stood there because I would not cross her threshold uninvited, and she turned and saw me and waited. "I will not ask you tonight," I said. "I will not ask you next week. There is no hurry. The bond is the bond. You may ride beside it as long as you wish before you marry it." She looked at me a long moment. "What if I do not want to wait?" she said, very low. I did not move. "Then we do not wait," I said. She crossed the room. She took my hand. She put her wrist against mine, the silver sickle moon against its mate, and she said, in a voice that was not loud and was not small, "I will be your Luna, Kale, if you will have me." "I will have you," I said. "I have had you since you opened your door to a stranger in the snow." She did not weep. She did not laugh. She only set her forehead against my shoulder and stood there a long minute, and her hand on my wrist did not move. I did not cross the threshold that night. We were not in that kind of hurry. I went back to my own room and lay on my back and looked at the ceiling and thought, I have been a king for 14 years and a man for 40, and not one day until this one was the way it should have been. We came to my hall on the 4th morning. I had sent ahead. I had wanted the court ready, but I had not wanted them gathered in the great hall as if for a ceremony. I wanted them lining the road instead. I wanted my people to see her not on a dais but on a horse, riding in beside me, a woman in a green velvet cloak with snow in her hair, and a small boy waving from a carriage behind her, and 3 great black wolves at her flanks. I wanted them to see her as she was, not a queen made by jewels, but a woman the king had ridden 91 days to find. They lined the road. They were silent at first. I think they did not yet know what to do with what they were seeing. Then Rowan, small clever Rowan, who had never been a quiet child, stood up in the carriage and shouted, "Look, Hessa, it's Bron," and pointed at the stable master, who had taught him to ride at 3, and the stable master burst into tears in the front line of my pack and shouted his name back, and the silence broke. They cheered. They cheered for the boy. They cheered for me. They cheered for the wolves. And then, as Myra passed them on her quiet bay, they cheered for her, not yet because they knew her, but because they understood with the old wisdom of a pack that she was the reason their heir was alive. She did not lift her chin. She did not bow her head. She rode straight and looked at them the way she had looked at me at her door, steady and gray-eyed and without flinching, and her hand on the reins was steady, and her face was the face of a Luna already, though she did not know it. I took her hand at the gate in front of all of them and lifted her down from the mare. I did not lift her up onto a dais. I drew her to me at the foot of the steps and I said, loud enough for them to hear, "This is Myra. She fed my brother's son through the cruelest winter in the king's woods. She did not know who he was. She did it because she would have done it for any small life that came bleeding to her door. She is the mate of the Iron Crown." A great quiet ran through them. Then Bryn, Bryn of the long memory, Bryn who had carried me through the worst of the 91 days, went forward through the line of my people and lay down at her feet in the courtyard, and dropped his great black head onto the snow and stayed. One by one my sworn wolves followed him. Iran, Vasha, the pack's old grandmother wolf Eldra, who had not lain down for any human in 7 years, came forward from where she had been watching at the kitchen door and lay down at Myra's other foot. Then the dogs of the courtyard. Then the children of the pack, kneeling without being asked, because their mothers had not stopped them. Myra did not weep. I will say it for her again because I am proud of it. She did not weep. She bent down slowly, gently, and laid her hand on Bryn's great head and said, very quietly, "Thank you," and stood up again and looked at my people, and said, in a voice that carried farther than I had thought she could carry it, "Thank you for being so kind to a stranger." We were married 3 weeks later. It was a small ceremony by the standards of my house. She wore a plain ivory dress and her mother's only ring, which her father had sent with a letter I do not need to discuss here. Rowan held the cushion with the bond rings on it and dropped it and picked it up and grinned. Hessa stood for her. 3 of my counselors stood for me. The hall was full of pack and not of politics. The Grafin captain came to my citadel a month after the wedding with his son Doran walking behind him. They knelt in my hall. Myra was beside me on the smaller seat. They were given the judgment I had said they would be given. The captaincy of the Grafin was passed from that family to another, and Doran was sent for 10 years to serve at the northern border under a commander who would not coddle him. They were not killed. They were not whipped. They were not banished. They were quietly put down from the height they had taken for themselves, and they were sent back into the world to live as smaller men. I do not know what they think of me. I do not particularly care. I know what Myra thinks of me, and I know that the small daughter she carries now, in her 2nd winter as my Luna, will never have anything to fear from any captain in any pack in my kingdom, and that is enough. It is late as I write this. The fire is low. Rowan is 10 now. He is asleep upstairs with the new pup at his feet, a real wolf cub this time, a gift from the western packs and not a lost heir in a thin coat. Myra is asleep beside me on the long couch in the small library, her hair loose, her hand on the small round of her belly. The mark on her wrist is silver and clean, the way it has been every day since the morning at her cabin. I think sometimes about the door. I think about the moment I knocked and the bolt drew back, and her gray eyes looked up at me through a hand's breadth of gap, careful and unafraid. I think about what would have happened if I had ridden 1 valley west of where I rode that morning, or if the wind had not carried the smoke. I think about a woman alone in a cabin for 4 winters, mending her own books, feeding a wolf cub the bread she could not spare, and the great quiet kingdom around her not knowing. I do not think about it for long. It makes me a worse king than I want her to have. So I let it go, and I look at her sleeping, and I put my hand over hers on her belly, and I tell her quietly, so as not to wake her, what I told her at the inn, the night she crossed the room. I have had you since you opened your door to a stranger in the snow. And then I bank the fire, and I carry her up to our rooms and we sleep.